Mikhail Bakunin was not born into a world ready for his ideas, nor was he the kind of man who could quietly accept the order of things. He was born in 1814 in a small village called Pryamukino, in the heart of Imperial Russia, a land ruled by absolute monarchy, where peasants were bound to the soil as serfs, and free thought could get a man exiled, jailed, or erased. Yet even as a child, Bakunin had fire in his blood, a restlessness that could not be tamed by tradition, family expectations, or the rigid disciplines of military life. His father, a nobleman with Enlightenment leanings, filled the home with books, philosophy, and poetry. His mother, gentle but devout, taught obedience to God and Tsar. But young Mikhail looked at the world and saw chains, invisible ones that people wore proudly as if they were jewelry. And he asked himself, why should any man be ruled by another? Why should human beings, born with minds and wills of their own, surrender their freedom to kings, priests, and masters? That question became the burning soul of his life. As a teenager, Bakunin was sent to a military academy in St. Petersburg, and for a while, it seemed he would follow the path laid out for him, become an officer, serve the Tsar, live with honor. But something inside him rebelled against uniforms, drills, and salute commands. He once wrote that the military felt like a prison of the spirit. So he walked away, not just from the army, but from a future already written for him. He chose poverty over obedience, homelessness over submission, uncertainty over certainty, because to Bakunin, freedom was worth any price. He traveled to Moscow and fell in with a group of young intellectuals reading German philosophy. They read Kant, Schelling, Hegel, especially Hegel, whose ideas about the dialectic, the struggle and evolution of spirit through conflict, shook Bakunin to the core. Hegel once wrote, "The passion for destruction is also a creative passion." Those words became etched into Bakunin's very being, and he repeated them so often that people thought they were his own. The idea that society evolves through conflict, that destruction could pave the way for liberation, this became the seed of his revolutionary philosophy. But unlike most philosophers who stayed in lecture halls, Bakunin wanted action. Thought meant nothing if it did not break chains. He moved to Berlin, then Dresden, then Paris, wherever revolution seemed to be brewing. And on those restless roads, something in him shifted. He moved from idealist philosophy to revolutionary activism. He was no longer satisfied debating ideas, he wanted to change the world. In Paris, he met Karl Marx, who was also burning with a desire to transform society. At first, they admired each other, Bakunin, the fiery romantic rebel, as Marx, the analytical critic of capitalism. Both dreamed of a world without oppression, without exploitation. But soon, their relationship would turn into rivalry, for their visions of freedom were different at the core. Life for Bakunin was now a storm, speeches, riots, political conspiracies, the police always a few steps behind. In 1848, Europe erupted like a volcano. Revolution broke out in France, Germany, Italy, Austria. Old kingdoms trembled. And Bakunin was everywhere, like a wind-whispering rebellion. He spoke to workers, students, soldiers. He told them that freedom cannot be handed down from rulers, it must be seized by the people themselves. He told them the state, no matter if ruled by a king or a parliament, was still a machine of oppression. He said true liberation comes not from seizing power, but from destroying it. But revolutions failed. Monarchies struck back. Streets that once echoed with chants now echoed with marching boots. Bakunin was captured in Dresden after a failed uprising. He was sentenced to death, but the sentence was commuted first to life in prison, then to extradition to Russia. There, he was thrown into the Peter and Paul fortress, a cold stone labyrinth where light barely entered. In a lonely cell, he scratched his final confessions on walls and scraps of paper. His teeth began to fall out. His hair went grey. Chains ate into his skin. He was moved from one prison to another, then to Siberia, as far as the Tsar could send him, to bury him alive in snow and silence. But the spirit of rebellion could not be buried. In Siberia, Bakunin married a Polish woman named Antonia, and for a short time, he seemed calm. But inside, the storm still raged. In 1861, he escaped. Yes, escaped from Siberia itself, one of the most daring escapes in history. He fled on horseback, then by ship, across the Pacific to Japan, then to America, then back to Europe. The world thought him dead. But suddenly, he walked into London, greeted his old comrades, and said, "We have work to do." He joined the International Workingmen's Association, the first international, where Marx was the leading figure. But now came the great clash that would define the history of socialism and anarchism. Marx believed in capturing political power, using the state to create a dictatorship of the proletariat that would eventually wither away. Bakunin laughed at this. He said, "No dictatorship can produce freedom. Even if it calls itself revolutionary, it will still make slaves." He believed that power itself was the enemy, not just kings, but all forms of authority, governments, churches, even revolutionary parties. He argued that freedom must be built from the bottom up through voluntary federations of workers, peasants, local communes, not from the top down by a new ruling class. He believed that the state must be abolished immediately, not gradually. "Liberty without socialism is privilege and injustice," he said. "Socialism without liberty is slavery and brutality." These words became the foundation of anarchism, not chaos, but a vision of a world built on mutual aid, free association, and equality without rulers. To Bakunin, humans are not naturally evil, they become corrupted when given power over others. Therefore, the solution is not better rulers, but no rulers. Marx and Bakunin fought bitterly within the International. Marx accused Bakunin of being a violent dreamer, Bakunin accused Marx of being an authoritarian. Eventually, Marx used procedural power to expel Bakunin and his faction. But history would remember this conflict as the split between communism and anarchism. Marx believed in the power of the state. Bakunin believed in the power of the people, without a state. Bakunin spent his last years in poverty and illness, but his pen never rested. He wrote letters, pamphlets, and books, warning against the dangers of centralized power and predicting, with haunting accuracy, what would happen if Marxists ever came to rule. He wrote, "They will take the place of the Tsars, wear red flags instead of crowns, but the people will still be chained." Decades later, when the Soviet Union rose, many would look back and say, "Bakunin warned us." What made him powerful was not just his ideas but the way he lived them. He gave away his inheritance. He refused titles, positions, authority. He slept on floors, ate little, traveled endlessly, spoke in broken languages to unite workers of all nations. He believed in humanity with a passion so fierce it burned him from the inside. He believed the revolution would not come from books alone, but from the hearts of ordinary people. Some called him a madman. Others called him a prophet. Fyodor Dostoevsky, who once knew him personally, said that when Bakunin spoke, you felt as though the earth itself was shaking. He had no personal desire for power. In fact, he feared it. He said, "I am not a leader. I want no disciples." Let every man be his own master. This humility made him dangerous to empires, because he was a man who could not be bought or silenced. But his life was not without failures. Revolutions failed. He was betrayed by allies, hunted by kings, slandered by Marxists, and often broke in health and money. Yet he kept going. Because for him, rebellion was not just political, it was spiritual. It was about preserving human dignity against any force that tried to crush it. He believed that to be truly alive is to resist. In 1876, old, sick, and tired, Bakunin lay in a hospital in Bern, Switzerland. His body was broken, but his eyes still carried that wild fire. When a friend came to see him, he whispered, "The passion for destruction is a creative passion too." Those were among his last words. He died on July 1, 1876. He had no grave fit for a hero, no statues, no monuments. But he left something greater, an idea that could not die. Today, his ideas echo in every protest against tyranny, in every voice that cries out for freedom, in every heart that refuses to kneel. He taught that rebellion is not hatred. It is love, love for those who suffer, love for those who are silenced, love for a future where no person is master over another. He taught that freedom is not given from above, it is built from below. That equality is not law, it is a way of living together. And that no system, no ideology, no government is worth more than a single human soul. This is Mikhail Bakunin, not just the philosopher of rebellion, but the heartbeat of every struggle for liberation. His life reminds us that the world changes not when power shifts hands, but when people awaken. And perhaps today, in a world filled with new forms of control, surveillance, and silence, his voice speaks louder than ever. Do not wait for leaders. Do it alone, person to person. Begin now.